Hey guys, tonight we slip back into the ash-choked air and relentless rhythm of the Middle Ages, not as a knight, not as a noble, but as something far more exhausting, a village blacksmith. You stand alone before your forge in the dim pre-dawn. Stillness, the cold biting into your bones. The sky hasn't begun to lighten yet, and your breath forms tiny clouds as you tug on a sweat-stiffened tunic from yesterday. The smell of burnt charcoal clings to everything: your clothes, your skin, your hair. You live in smoke. You dream in smoke. You probably won't survive this life, at least not for long. Not with all your fingers, and certainly not with your back unbroken dot. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it right now? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You rise while the village sleeps. The rooster hasn't even bothered yet, but you're already stoking the fire. The coals from yesterday's work are still warm, which means you can build up the heat faster, but also means you probably should have cleaned the hearth better last night. You didn't. You never do. Time doesn't allow for niceties like that. You barely have time to blink. The forge is more than just your workplace. It's your life support. Without it, your home is just a cold box of stone and straw. The forge gives you heat. It gives you trade. It gives you just enough reputation to not get kicked out of the village for smelling like burning hair all the time. The first task of the day, blowing air into the coals with your massive foot-powered bellows. You plant one worn boot onto the creaky pedal and begin pumping rhythmically. Air rushes through, the embers glow orange, then yellow, and then that hypnotic, dangerous white. The metal you'll be working today won't bend unless you reach that kind of heat. It also won't forgive a single mistake. Behind you, a bucket of yesterday's water sits half frozen. You dunk your hands in it to wash off the soot, and instantly regret it. The water stings like tiny knives. Your knuckles are cracked and raw. You wince. You swear, quietly. You're still polite enough not to wake the chickens. There's no breakfast. There's barely bread. Yesterday's crust is hard as a horseshoe, and just as satisfying. You chew it like you're punishing yourself for being born. Somewhere in the pile of scrap beside the anvil is today's first job, reshaping a bent plowshare for Farmer Edmund, who swears it wasn't his fault even though it clearly was. You fish out the iron lump, its shape more abstract sculpture than farming tool, and toss it into the coals. You'll need to heat it for nearly an hour before it's ready to hammer dot. In the meantime, you sharpen a few scythes. You hold them up to the pale light leaking in through the shutter. One of them has a chunk missing. Another looks like someone tried to cut a rock in half with it. Probably did. Here's a fun historical fact to grind against your sleepy thoughts. In many medieval villages, the blacksmith was one of the very few people who handled every kind of tool, from surgical instruments to torture devices. The same pair of tongs could be used to pull a tooth or brand a criminal. Charming. And while we're talking quirks, did you know some blacksmiths were thought to have mystical powers? People whispered you could trap spirits in iron. Others thought blacksmiths could heal sick animals just by tapping them with a hammer gently. We hope. Historians still argue whether this reputation for magic helped. or hurt blacksmiths. On one hand, folks brought you gift to keep your powers happy. On the other, they also blamed you when someone's goat dropped dead with no warning. You reach for your hammer. The handle is worn from your own sweat. It fits your hand like it was carved from your bones. When the plowshare is finally white-hot, you haul it to the anvil with a pair of thick iron tongs. Sparks shoot out like angry stars as you swing. The ring of hammer on metal fills the forge, echoes against the stone walls, vibrates up your arm. You are a human earthquake. Each blow must land in just the right place, with just the right force. Too soft, and the metal shrugs it off. Too hard, and you'll crack it, and good luck explaining that to Farmer Edmund, who once tried to pay you in turnips and a song about goats. You pause to drink. The water is warm now because you keep it close to the forge. It tastes faintly of iron and ash. You drink it anyway. You always do. Outside, the village is starting to stir. A dog barks. A child cries. You hear the creak of cartwheels, the slap of hooves in mud. The world is waking up just as you're already tired, but there's no room for rest. The metal's cooling. You place it back in the coals, back to the bellows, back to the ache in your legs and the throb in your shoulders. You keep moving because if you stop, the whole system breaks starting with you. And you? You haven't broken yet, but the day is still young. Your stomach growls, but it doesn't matter. Breakfast is something other people have time for people who don't have 6 orders backed up and a hinge repair by noon. You grab a half-burnt oat cake from a wooden shelf near the wall and gnaw. And like a rat in a hurry, it tastes like charcoal and disappointment. Your forge has finally hit the sweet spot white hot, but not blinding. You've learned to read the fire better than you read most people. The hiss of metal meeting heat, the faint shimmer at the edge of iron turning pliable. These are your language. You speak it fluently, in burnt knuckles and calloused hands. Hammers back in your grip. The plowshare's nearly there. You swing with the rhythm your body knows too well. Draw breath, strike, shift angle, strike again. 1, 2, 3. Like the ticking of a giant molten clock. You've been at it for so long that you start to hear music in it, though maybe it's just the sleep deprivation finally getting creative. Once it's flattened and bent just so, you plunge the metal into the quench barrel. It hisses like a viper, steam curling upward in a ghostly plume. A drop hits your cheek. You don't flinch anymore. You've been flinched out. You rest the finished piece on a stone shelf to cool and wipe your face on your sleeve. Bad idea it's coated in soot. Now you look like you've been wrestling a chimney sweep. Again, outside the forge, the sky is overcast. A typical medieval morning. There's a cart trundling past, pulled by a horse that looks as tired as you feel. A boy runs behind it, kicking mud up his own back. You shake your head and reach for the next project, a set of nails. Not glamorous, but nails are gold in disguise. No one realizes how many you make, how many go missing, how many people knock on your door for just one more, always just one more. And you always give it, because if you don't, they'll call you stingy, or worse, lazy, as if laziness were even physically possible in your profession. Hammering nails isn't hard, but it's tedious. You heat a narrow strip of iron, slice. it into bits and shape each one by hand. Taper the point, flatten the head. Repeat, over and over. The repetitive clang is almost hypnotic. Here's your mainstream historical fact for today. In the Middle Ages, iron nails were so valuable that entire buildings were burned down just to recover them. You'd be surprised how many old cottages went up in flames because someone wanted to salvage a few handfuls of what you make in a morning. Quirky detail time. Some blacksmiths marked their nails with tiny, almost invisible notches. A sort of maker's mark. Part pride, part quality control, part don't blame me when your shed falls apart. Historians still argue whether this practice was widespread or just something a few prideful smiths did in wealthier regions. But imagine not having time to care about aesthetics while choking on forge smoke and fending off chickens in your doorway. Ah, yes, the chickens. They've wandered into your shop again. They love the warmth. You threaten them with a pair of tongs, but they know you too well to take it seriously. They scatter, clucking indignantly, then settle under the workbench as if you didn't exist. Freeloaders, the apprentice shows. Up late? Again. He's barely 12 and thinks he knows everything because he read a religious tract once that said, "Fire was a metaphor." You glare at him, and he mumbles something that might have been sorry before fumbling with the bellows. He pumps too fast, and the coals flare like an angry god. You bark at him to slow down before the whole place explodes in your faces. He rolls his eyes. You pretend not to see. One day he'll get burned badly enough to listen. Until then, it's your job to keep him from turning the forge into a chiva a. Crater dot, you toss him a bar of pig iron. Nails, you say, because he hasn't earned more than that today. Not the fancy gate hinges, not the horseshoes, not even a latch pin, just nails. He sighs. You sigh louder. Your mind drifts for a second to your own apprenticeship. You were 7. Your master was a brute who barely spoke and smelled like fermented onions. He taught with smacks more than words. You swore you'd be better than that dot you are, technically. You only threaten your apprentice with sarcasm. Progress. You pause to stretch your back. It makes a sound like stepping on twigs. Pain shoots up your spine, but you don't even grunt. That's just morning stiffness, except it's noon now. Time folds in strange ways inside the forge. It could be 10 a.m. or next Thursday, and you wouldn't notice. You switch out the tongs for the fuller, a rounded tool that helps shape curves and start working on the broken handle socket of a scythe. A local widow brought it in yesterday. Said her son dropped it while harvesting and bent it out of shape. You didn't ask questions. You just nodded and added it to the pile. The metal resists at first, as if offended to be handled. You coax it gently, then with force. It softens. You mold it. For a moment, you think about sculpting something for yourself, an ornament, maybe, or a trinket. But the thought fades. No time. Never time you step back to check your work. Not bad. You tap it lightly against the stone bench to test the join. Solid. A breath escapes you. Not satisfaction, just temporary relief. And then a knock at the door. A woman holding a frying pan. The handle's cracked. Again. You give her a tired nod and wave her in. Add it to the pile. There's always a pile. The pile never shrinks. Not really. You could spend 10 hours pounding metal and still, somehow, New things just appear cracked cauldrons. Bent shears, a door hinge rusted to the point of existential crisis. You wonder if the villagers secretly break things on purpose just to keep you occupied. Wouldn't put it past them. Outside your forge, the village bustles. The air smells faintly of damp hay, animal sweat, and someone's attempt at a stew that probably should have stayed a soup. A few chickens peck at puddles. The miller's boy lugs sacks of grain toward the abbey. And you? You're in your cave of sparks, the village's reluctant dragon, guarding not gold but glowing iron. People treat you like a walking utility. You're not quite invisible, but you're definitely not celebrated either. Unless someone needs something, then suddenly you're everyone's favorite neighbor that the door creaks again. It's Father Benute from the church, holding a rusted censer chain like it's made of gold. He asks very politely if you can mend it by vespers. That's in 3 hours. You smile and nod and mentally rearrange your entire afternoon. He blesses you and leaves. You resist the urge to mutter something unholy. Blacksmiths were often seen as the heart of the village after all. Nothing moved without you. No tools. No wheels, no weapons. Even the church relied on you to keep its doors swinging and bells ringing. But the title of village backbone comes with exactly 0 perks. Fun historical nugget. Many medieval villages actually centered physically around the forge. Not the church, not the market square, the forge. It was loud, smelly, and incredibly necessary. You were a cornerstone, whether you liked it or not. And here's a fun fringe detail. In some superstitious towns, your forge fire was never allowed to go out. It was seen as a bad omen, like snuffing out the village's soul. You once let it die on a feast day, and 3 separate people gave you side-eye for a week. Historians still argue whether blacksmiths were loved or feared more. The ambiguity came with the job. You made swords and shackles, horseshoes and handcuffs. You were equal parts craftsman, mechanic, and minor villain. You grabbed the censer chain with your thick fingers and eyed the links. They're rusted so badly, you wonder if Father Benute's been swinging incense or swamp water. The metal flakes like old bark. You heat a new section of chain and begin carefully crafting a replacement. The apprentice stares. Why not just make a whole new one? You grunt, because that'd take all day and God only gave me 3 hours. He laughs, but you're already back to hammering. Tap, turn, twist, over and over until the ring closes neatly. You loop the new link into the old chain and give it a test swing. Good enough for holy smoke. You set it aside and glance at the window. The sun's crawling higher and the heat in the forge is becoming oppressive. Your shirt sticks to your chest. Sweat trickles down your spine. You'd kill for a breeze or a cold beer or both, but no time for that. Either dot another knock. It's the butcher, red-faced and out of breath. He's broken the cleaver handle again. You want to ask how? You don't. You just gesture toward the bench and add it to the pile. A pattern emerges. Mend, wipe your brow, answer a knock, repeat. You don't even know if the bellows have stopped since dawn. You hope they did. You think they did. Or maybe that's just your heartbeat mimicking their rhythm. You sit down briefly, just for a moment, and feel the weight of everything settle on your shoulders. Not just the day, but the years. Every bent nail, every molten horseshoe, every hammer stroke echoing in your spine. Your apprentice startles you by speaking. Do blacksmiths ever get famous? You smirk. Only if they mess up something really big. But there's some truth to that. A few blacksmiths, usually royal. Ones were known far and wide. Their names etched into legends, or at least into church bells and castle gates. But they didn't get there by hammering plowshares for turnip farmers. You, on the other hand, have had the honor of making the same cooking spit for the same family 3 times in the past year. Fame? Not likely. But maybe, just maybe, someone will keep your hammer when you're gone. You rise with a groan and grab the cleaver blade. It's chipped in places, nicked in others. You heat it up and begin the delicate work of reshaping the edge. A cleaver isn't just a hunk of steel, it's balance, force, purpose. A bad cleaver cuts fingers. A good one slices clean through bone. You try not to dwell on that thought. 2 long dot sparks rise in golden flares as you file the edge. The metal hisses in protest, but slowly it obeys. It always does. You wonder if that's what people think of you, useful, but not quite human. Just something to be shaped, used, and left alone. You hand the cleaver back to the butcher. He grunts, thanks. You, and is gone, no coin. He says he'll pay you in meat later. You nod, knowing later means when the pigs fly into the forge and cook themselves. You sigh. Again, your apprentice, now covered in his own layer of sweat and soot, asks if he can take a break. You look at him. Then at the pile, then. Back at him, you both laugh. Sort of, the day isn't half over, and neither are you. The forge is no longer warm, it's blistering. Even with the shutters cracked open and the door ajar, the heat swells like a living creature, pressing against your chest, crawling into your sleeves, curling around your throat. You wipe your forehead with the back of your hand, but the sweat just returns instantly, like a loyal dog with terrible timing. Everything sticks. Your shirt, your hair, the leather strap holding your apron. Even your tools feel sticky, the metal slick with a fine film of grime and iron dust. It's like working inside a bread oven. Except instead of loaves, you're baking your bones. You pick up a pair of tongs to shift the iron rods resting in the coals. Even the tongs are hot. Not glowing, but hot enough to sting. You mutter something unprintable and yank them out, setting them on the edge of the water barrel. A hiss of steam reminds you. Nothing in here is harmless. Not the tools, not the fire, not even the water, and still, somehow, this is just another Thursday, outside. Someone's banging a pot and calling for their dog. Inside, your apprentice is blowing into the bellows with all the enthusiasm of a soggy turnip. You remind him to keep a steady rhythm. He nods and forgets immediately. There's a rhythm to blacksmithing, a dance of timing, of sweat, of instinct. You heat the iron until it glows like sunrise. You place it on the anvil, feel its softness through the tongs, and strike. The hammer swings in a gentle arc, landing with the force of a small earthquake. A second later, the sound follows, deep and musical. The village knows this song. They don't always like it, but they know it. Today you're shaping horseshoes. Not glamorous, but necessary. The village has only 4 horses, but they all seem to lose shoes weekly. Maybe it's the mud. Maybe it's sabotage. Maybe the horses are just as tired of this place as you are, as you shape the U-curve of the iron You recall a strange but true bit of medieval trivia. Some believed horseshoes had magical powers. Hung above doorways, they were thought to ward off evil spirits. Even the way the shoe was hung, points up or points down, was hotly debated. Historians still argue whether this superstition was genuinely widespread or simply a regional oddity. But even now, you occasionally get villagers who request a blessed shoe. You bless it the only way you know how by not dropping it on your foot. You work through 4 pairs before your elbow starts screaming. You stretch it, roll your shoulder, and keep going. Pain is just background noise at this point, like the bellows, the clatter of buckets outside, the whisper of steam. It only becomes a problem if it changes pitch dot. You hand off the finished shoes to your apprentice, who drops one instantly. It lands in a pile of hay and sizzles like bacon. He yelps, scrambles to douse it with water, and earns himself a snort from you and a sarcastic, slow clap. That's one way to start a barn fire, you say. He grins sheepishly. Just testing your emergency response. You roll your eyes and get back to work. You take a moment to rake out the coals. The fire crackles and settles, a living thing lulled to rest. You take a sip of warm water again, metallic and murky, and chew a strip of something that might once have been meat. It's chewy enough to be wood. Still, it beats the OATCAKE dot. Suddenly, a sharp hiss followed by a yelp. You whip around. The apprentice has burnt his forearm on the crucible rim. He's already sticking it in the water bucket, trying to act casual. His face betrays him. You don't yell. Burns happen. They're part of the job. But you do give him the look. The one that says focus, or you'll be learning to hammer with your toes. Once he's calmed down, you let him sit in the shade by the door and fan himself with a broken shovel blade. You almost envy him. You pick up a fresh iron bar. This one's for a latch hook, nothing fancy, just something to keep goats from pushing open a gate. You start the heat, start the shaping, and once again the familiar rhythm sets in. It's almost meditative, in a back-breaking, eye-watering sort of way. Here's something a bit more offbeat. Some smiths would test their skill by folding a bar multiple times to see how strong and beautiful they could make it. Decorative. Ironwork, patterned blades, even twisted bars for railings. You've tried it once or twice late at night when no one was watching. You still keep a piece hidden behind the tool shed, just in case someone ever asks if you can make art. They won't. You hear a creak behind you. A young woman stands at the door with a frying pan in one hand and a baby in the other. She looks apologetic. Handle snapped again, she says. You. Nod, gesture her in, and gently place the pan on the pile. The baby stares at you with wide, suspicious eyes, probably wondering why you look like a chimney learned to walk. Once she's gone, you repair the handle in minutes, bend, rivet, cool. You wonder how many frying pans you fixed. Hundreds. Thousands. It doesn't matter. There'll be more dot. As you look at the repaired pan, a funny thought occurs. The only things in this village more constant than you are the problems you're expected to solve. The sky outside has turned a deeper gray. Storm's coming. You can smell the rain in the air-wet dirt, wood smoke, and something sharp like copper. You brace yourself. Rain means fewer customers, but more repairs. Leaky roofs, sagging hinges, carts stuck in mud. It also means the forge will hiss with every gust. steam curling up like ghostly snakes. You stoke the fire again, that it's never still for long. You reach for the next item from the ever-growing pile, a curved iron blade with a notch at the edge, a sickle chipped and dull, its edge worn nearly flat, probably used to hack through more roots than grain. You rub your thumb along the curve. Feel the nicks, the slight warping, the quiet protest of metal that's tired of being mistreated. You understand it completely. With the fire roaring again, you slip the blade into the hottest part of the coals. The forge crackles in approval. You reach for your sharpening stone and run your hand along the wet surface. Still smooth, still serviceable. Like you, it gets the job done, even if it's lost its shine. The apprentice tries to organize the scrap pile, but his version of organize mostly involves moving things from one heap to another. You let it go. At least he's not breaking anything this time. The sickle's ready. You pull it from the coals with tongs and start hammering gently along the curve, just enough to straighten it, bring it back to its proper crescent form. Every clang echoes out into the street, reminding the village that yes, you are still here, still working, still shaping metal like a mad poet with a very loud pen. Fun. Fact time, did you know that? Medieval sickles were often made with embedded steel, strips in the edge for better sharpness. Iron alone couldn't hold a keen edge for long, so smiths layered steel where it counted. Like putting a sword's soul in a farmer's hand. Quirky tidbit: in some places, blacksmiths were asked to craft blessed sickles for rituals, especially around harvest time. Farmers believed that cutting the first stalk with a blessed blade could mean a better yield. You've never been asked to bless a tool, but you did once catch old man Bertram whispering to a shovel before digging. That counts, right? Historians still argue whether these ritual tools were widespread folk practice or more of a local superstition that got romanticized over time. Either way, you've had enough customers request lucky tools that you know better than to. Laugh. You finish shaping the blade and turn to your grindstone. It's a large wheel mounted on a crude frame turned by foot pedal. You position the blade and begin to spin the stone, sparks flaring out like tiny golden insects. The edge returns, slowly, singing against the stone, one patient sweep at a time. Your apprentice peers over your shoulder. Do you ever make swords? He asks. You exhale. The question again. Once or twice, you say, mostly for people who had no idea what to do with them. He nods like he understands. He doesn't. Swords, the glamorous side of smithing, the side that gets sung about in taverns. The truth? You've made maybe 3 full blades in your life. Each one took days, hurt your hands, bent your tongs, and left you with blisters in new and exciting places. One was for a rich merchant's son. Another for a local lord's parade uniform never saw a single battle. The third? A gift for a cousin who vanished during a border skirmish. You never got it back. The idea that blacksmiths spend their days forging legendary swords is a myth, a seductive one, sure. But you make the things that hold the world together. Hinges, hoes, nails. You don't make heroes. You make the tools heroes ignore until something breaks. You cool the sickle in. The water barrel and the steam ghosts rise again. You hand it off to the waiting farmer, who nods and hands you a wrinkled pouch of beans. You smile as if that's acceptable currency. Maybe you'll trade them for eggs, or maybe just plant them and hope for magic. The door swings shut behind him, and you catch a glimpse of the village green. Children are chasing one another with sticks, and someone's dog is trying to steal a cabbage. You half smile, briefly dot, then you see the next customer dot. It's the wheelwright, and he's dragging a shattered cartwheel. Of course he is. You meet him at the door. The wheel is split clean in two, one spoke twisted, the iron rim warped beyond recognition. Can it be fixed? He asks. You run your fingers along the cracked wood. Depends how long you give me. Need it by sundown. You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs. Livestock market. I'll pay. You nod slowly and roll the wreck into the forge. He wasn't kidding. It's a mess. The iron band around the outside, called the tire, is completely misshapen. You'll need to heat it, beat it straight, then refit it around a new wheel. You tell the apprentice to fetch a length of ash wood from the back. He returns carrying something that looks more like a club than a cart part. Close enough dot together. You strip down the broken wheel and begin cutting new spokes. This is where the blacksmith becomes a carpenter, a cooper, a problem solver. It's messy and precise and incredibly frustrating. You shave the wood, fit the hub, slot the spokes, test the fit. It creaks. Of course it does. You adjust it again. Then comes the fire part. You set the iron rim into the coals. It needs to be red hot when you fit it around the wooden wheel. The process is fast, brutal, and loud. The heat expands the metal, allowing it to slip over the wood. Once cooled, it contracts and locks everything in place. The trick is to not burn the wood in the process. The rim glows. You and the apprentice lift it together, rush outside, and drop it over the new wheel. Smoke pours upward. A sizzle, a hiss. The smell of scorched bark. You toss a bucket of water over it. Steam billows. Somewhere a dog barks in surprise. You cough and wave away the fog. It worked. It's ugly. Slightly lopsided. But it will roll. The wheelwright claps you on the back, hard enough to knock the breath from your lungs. He hands you 2 copper coins and promises more next time. You nod, and he's gone. You collapse onto the bench near the forge. The steam is still fading. Your hair is damp with sweat, and your arms feel like they've been dragged behind a mule cart. Another thing fixed. Another problem solved, and another customer already at the door. You don't even look. You just gesture toward the pile. You don't recognize the man standing in your doorway. That's never a good sign. He's travel-stained with a faded cloak and a suspiciously clean pair of boots. Outsiders always bring odd requests. You already feel the headache before he opens his mouth. My landlord said you could fix this, he says, holding out a mangled iron hinge that looks like it's been run over by a siege engine. Twice you take it gently. It's twisted, cracked near the pin and half the mounting. Plate is missing. You raise an eyebrow. What's it from? Stable door. Goat kicked it. You nod. Of course it was a goat. You've lost track of how many problems in your life can be traced back to goats. Medieval rule of thumb: if it's broken, muddy, or mysteriously sticky, blame a goat. You toss the hinge into the coal bed and get to work again. The metal protests as it heats, groaning like it knows what's coming. You sort through your scrap pile for a matching bracket. Nothing's quite right. You settle for something close and prepare to reshape it. Again, the apprentice hovers nearby, waiting for direction. You wave him off toward the bellows. Time for more air. Time for more flame. You hammer the bracket slowly, watching the metal swell under each blow. The heat pulses off the anvil, filling the forge with that dull orange glow you've come to associate with both progress and dehydration. Another day, another fix. This is the rhythm of your life, repairing things you didn't break, making tools you'll never use, sweating over other people's mistakes. There's no glory in it, just the faint satisfaction of function restored. But some days, that's enough. Fun historical fact. Most medieval blacksmiths did far more repair work than new crafting. Villagers couldn't afford new tools every time something broke. Your real job isn't building, it's salvaging. You're the duct tape of the Middle Ages. And here's a quirk: some blacksmiths became so skilled at repairs, their neighbors believed they could mend anything except a broken heart. One local tale even said a smith once repaired a cracked church bell using only patience and a particularly hard prayer. Historians still argue whether that bell story is metaphor or just very optimistic fiction. You shape the hinge with deliberate care, trying to make it stronger than before without using too much iron. You have to ration your stock carefully. New shipments aren't always reliable, and when they do come, they're expensive. Sometimes a week's worth of work disappears into one crooked bar of subpar pig iron. You dunk the finished hinge in the water barrel and hand it back to the stranger. That'll hold your goats, you say, unless they're angry. He chuckles, hands you a shiny coin, an actual silver penny. Rare. You turn it over in your hand. Real coinage, not beans, eggs, or prayers. You nod, and he's gone, vanishing into the late afternoon mist like he was never real. You slip the coin into a small pouch in your apron. You've been saving for a new pair of boots for 2 years. The ones you're wearing have more patches than original leather. One more silver penny might just tip the scale. The bellows wheeze to a stop. You glance at the apprentice. He's slouched against the wall, wiping his hands on a rag and watching the forge like it might bite. Get the door bar, you say. Let's fix it before nightfall. The old wooden door that guards your forge has been hanging crooked for weeks. You made the original iron bar that holds it shut, but time and damp have warped it. It sticks, jams, and sometimes just refuses to open altogether. You've been meaning to fix it, but like everything else, you're always too busy fixing someone else's broken world. You and the apprentice pry the bar free, wrestle it onto the anvil, and begin heating. It's simple work, but satisfying. A task for yourself, for once. You straighten the bar slowly, then tweak the mounts. You test the swing, and it slides smooth, beautiful, silent. The kind of thing no one notices until it stops working again. You reinstall the bar, just as twilight descends. The village glows soft and golden in the last light of the day. You stand in the doorway, stretching your sore arms, watching a trail of smoke curl upward from a neighbor's chimney. Somewhere in the distance, a cow bellows with dramatic flair. You could stop here. You should, but you won't. There's a broken saw blade still on the workbench. It was dropped off by the cooper's son 3 days ago. You promised you'd get to it, and you always do what you promise, even if it means working in the dark. You light a lantern, lower it near the bench, and inspect the blade. It's cracked. Near the midpoint, a clean break, but a dangerous one. You can't weld it fully back together, not with the tools you've got, but you can reinforce it with a brace, make it usable, functional. Ugly maybe, but it'll bite wood again. You heat a narrow strip of iron and start shaping the brace. It's delicate work, the kind that needs patience and just the right touch. You feel yourself slowing, not from caution, but from sheer exhaustion. And still, you work. Here's a small, strange tradition you remember. In some villages, blacksmiths would tap each new tool 3 times before handing it over, like a blessing. No one really knows why. Habit, perhaps, or maybe superstition. You've done it a few times without thinking tap, tap. There's something comforting about it. A secret ritual between you and the metal. Historians still argue whether this was a symbolic gesture of quality control or a leftover pagan ritual, quietly hidden under the weight of Christian habit. You don't really care. It just feels right. You finish the brace, rivet it to the saw, and test the flex. Solid enough. It'll do. Outside, the sky has faded from gold to velvet. A few stars blink through. The wind picks up, cooler now. You sit on the stool near the door, just for a moment, just to feel something other than the hammer in your hand. Your apprentice has fallen asleep against the bellows, his mouth slightly open, his hair a mess of soot and sweat. You'll let him rest. A while longer. The forge crackles softly. And so does your back. You don't need a rooster to tell you morning's come. Your joints do that for you. As dawn seeps in through the warped shutters, you shift stiffly on the bench, blinking away the forge's glow still burned into your vision. The fires down to embers, and the air feels like cooled breath, quiet, smoky, thick with yesterday's labor. You rise slowly, muscles mutinous, and stretch your arms until something pops unpleasantly. There it is, your daily alarm clock. The apprentice is still snoring against the wall. His hair is matted with soot, his tunic half covered in coal dust, and his hand loosely clutching a half-finished nail. Adorable. You toss a rag at his face. He jolts awake, blinking rapidly, then groans. What time is it? Time to earn your supper, you reply, stepping over the sleeping dog that has apparently adopted your forge during the night. Probably for the heat. You don't mind. It's the only creature in here that doesn't talk back. The first job of the day is easy on paper, at least. The baker's oven latch snapped. Again, and this time she brought a sample of the bread. That got burnt while the door hung open. It's roughly the size and density of a river rock. You could forge it into a weapon. You toss it aside and examine the latch mechanism. It's a thin, twisted piece of iron with a hinge that's seen better centuries. You decide to start from scratch. It's quicker than trying to coax life back into this medieval wire pretzel. You heat, bend, and shape the new latch while your apprentice grinds out the hinges. Together, silently, you fall into rhythm. He's getting better, you realize. His file strokes are even. His grip on the tongs isn't completely ridiculous anymore. You'd almost say you're proud if it didn't cost you your mysterious aura. You ever take on more than one apprentice? He asks, as if reading your thoughts. You shake your head, one headache at a time, and truthfully, it's all you can manage. You're not just teaching him how to shape metal, you're teaching him how to survive it. The burns, the boredom, the bone-deep fatigue. No school teaches that. Here's something most people don't realize: a blacksmith's apprentice typically worked for 7 years before he could call himself a journeyman. 7 years of hauling coal, pumping bellows, filing scrap, and fetching tools, not to mention being yelled at, ignored, and occasionally smacked with a set of tongs. Lightly, of course. Quirky detail: in some towns, the final test for an apprentice was forging a perfect horseshoe in under an hour, using only hand tools. Not because it was useful, but because it showed control under pressure. You remember your test? You failed the first time. Your master made you try again immediately. You passed. Then he nodded once and walked out of the forge. That was his version of congratulations. Historians still argue whether these tests were standardized or just cruel whims passed down from grumpy mentors. Either way, the rite of passage was real. It separated the dabblers from the lifers. You finished the latch and set it beside the red brick as a gentle reminder to the baker that maybe it's time for new hinges, too. You mark her name in the ledger. She'll probably pay you in crusts. Again. At least they're good for hammering nails. The next project comes in before breakfast, a rusty gate chain from the far end of the village. It's from the same farmer who always insists he could probably fix it himself if he had time, which means he absolutely can't. You accept the chain with a tight smile and a grumble, then start cleaning it. You chip off rust flakes the size of thumbprints. The links are bent in places, some nearly fused. You heat it, one section at a time, gently prying and reshaping until the chain flows again, like a river of iron. You ever wish you were something else? Your apprentice asks, breaking the silence. You don't answer at first. You just keep working, the tongs clicking like a ticking clock. Finally, you say, "Doesn't matter. I'm this now." He nods slowly. Maybe he understands. Maybe he will, because once you've forged iron long enough, it starts to forge you back. You're not just someone who makes things, you're someone made of the things you've made. The weight of hammers, the rhythm of fire, the calluses, the scars, the patience. It becomes who you are. A delivery boy arrives with a message and order from the local reeve. You sigh before you even open it. 2 new hinges for the manor barn, a locked bar for the granary, and a request for a decorative torch bracket. Decorative. Fancy word for this will take 5 times longer for no extra coin. Still, you scribble it into your to-do slate. The manor pays eventually, and it's not wise to anger the man who oversees grain rations. You've already had one winter of turnip-only meals. You start prepping the iron bars you'll need. As you measure the pieces, the apprentice begins sketching a rough outline for the bracket. It's crude, but earnest. You nod. Let him try. Let him think this job can be creative sometimes, even if you'll quietly remake it when he goes home. Here's another piece of trivia. Some medieval blacksmiths became accidental artists. The ornate hinges on cathedral doors, the floral ironwork in noble homes, all done by hands that also made manure rakes and axe heads. Sometimes form sneaks in through the cracks in function. Quirk of the trade. Many smiths signed these decorative works, but not with names. Instead, they hid tiny symbols, a bent curl in the scrollwork, or a loop in the hinge no one would see. It was their secret signature. You've done it once or twice. A mark only you would know. Historians still argue whether these flourishes were acts of rebellion, pride, or just a way to stay sane after 1,000 identical nails. You think it's all 3-dot by the time midday sun starts leaking through the shutter slats? The forge is alive again. The fire roars, the hammer sings, the anvil answers. Your body aches, your ears ring, your fingers are blackened. You pause only briefly to wipe sweat from your brow and drink water that tastes like it filtered through a roof beam. Then back to it. The apprentice is struggling with his drawing. You step beside him, nudge the chalk slightly, and say, "Look." For the balance, he stares, then nods. You return to the fire, because the world doesn't stop breaking, and you don't stop fixing. You hear the clatter of hooves before you see him, the knight, every blacksmith's favorite customer. You glance up from your work just in time to catch the flash of polished boots and the gleam of a surcoat already flecked with travel dust. He's standing in your doorway, silhouetted against the sky like he expects you to be impressed. You're not. You're trying to re-rivet a gate latch and your tongs are stuck. He clears his throat with theatrical flair. "Are you the smith?" You resist the urge to say, "No, I'm just a chimney sweep dressed like this for fun." Instead, you grunt, which in blacksmith speak translates to yes, and I know exactly what's coming. "I require armor repair," he says, holding up a dented cuirass that looks like it lost a wrestling match with a cartwheel. "I took a hard blow near Oak Hill, a most dishonorable ambush." You nod like you care, but you're already calculating how long it'll take to heat that chunk of plate, reshape it, and not crack the temper. You gesture for him to set it on the workbench, where it lands with a heavy thunk that echoes all the way to your spine. You give it a once-over. The left breast is deeply concaved, the armhole. Rivets have popped loose and one edge is cracked. Your eyebrow twitches. This wasn't just a blow. This was a tree. He doesn't laugh. Nobles never do. You roll up your sleeves and start clearing space on the bench. This is going to take the rest of your day, and maybe your soul medieval. Armor repair is no joke. It's not just banging dents out like a tin cup. You have to understand the metal, its heat treatment, its stress points. Hit it wrong and it buckles. Reheat it too much and it loses its strength. And if you mess up, guess who's wearing it into battle? Fun historical fact. Most knights didn't actually own full suits of armor. Too expensive, too rare. What they did have, they treated like heirlooms, and when it cracked or bent, they brought it to people like you and expected miracles with a 3-day deadline and 1 silver coin. Today's miracle involves removing the cracked shoulder plate. It's riveted in, which means carefully grinding off the heads without damaging the underlayer. You send the apprentice to pump the bellows and start heating the replacement, or you'll need to brace the inner chest. He groans slightly. You don't look up. "You want to be a smith?" he mutters. "Not anymore." You smirk as the cuirass heats. You prep your anvil for shaping. Heavy blows, careful placement, and a wooden mallet, this time not iron. You don't want to stretch the metal further. You just want to persuade it. Here's a fringe detail for you. Some blacksmiths specialized only in armor. They were called armorers and worked in specialized shops, often near castles. But in smaller towns like yours, your everything rolled into one armorer, farrier, toolmaker, locksmith, cart fixer, and sometimes unofficial village therapist. Historians still argue whether rural blacksmiths even should have been trusted with armor repair. It wasn't just about skill, it was about safety. If you failed to properly restore a plate, the knight could die in battle. But then again, no one else was available. And you? You do what needs doing. The breastplate glows dull red. You lift it carefully with your tongs and place it on the anvil. You position the mallet and start tapping delicately at first, like knocking on a giant iron heart. The metal resists, then yields, warping slowly back toward its original curve. The knight watches, arms crossed, probably expecting something more dramatic. After a moment, he asks, "Will it be perfect?" You pause mid-swing. "No, but it'll save your ribs." He nods solemnly, which for a knight is practically applause. You work silently, bending, shaping, reinforcing. The cracked section gets a riveted patch, carefully braced with a new steel strip you'd been saving for. Well, you weren't sure. Now it's gone. That's how this job works. Your best work disappears under someone else's name. You let the armor cool slowly, gently fanning it with a folded cloth. Fast cooling would weaken it. This part, this patience, is what separates real smiths from hopeful apprentices. The knight shifts awkwardly. "How much?" You think for a moment. This job could have bought you 2 weeks of bread, but you know how this goes. If you ask too much, he'll claim dishonor. If you ask too little, you set a bad precedent. You name a price that's fair, but forgettable. He nods, drops 2 silver coins onto the bench, and leaves without so much as a thank you. You watch him mount his horse, still wearing a dented helmet. He clinks off into the road like a mobile wind chime. The apprentice grins. You should have charged triple. You reply, "Only if I wanted to fight him in the street." And that's the thing about knights. They carry swords, but you carry hammers. And you know where their weak spots are. You wrap the remaining scrap from the repair and store it carefully. Every bit of steel is worth keeping. You never know when you'll need it for something smaller like a chisel, or a clasp, or a perfectly balanced latch dot. Your apprentice is still grinning when you hand him the knight's busted shoulder plate. "Fix this," you say. "Make it." A shovel. His eyes widen. "A knight's armor?" You nod. Even noble mistakes deserve a second life. He sets to work, proud and slightly terrified. You lean against the door frame, stretching your arms. The forge crackles behind you. Road ahead is quiet, and the day isn't done yet. You barely have time to wipe your hands before another figure darkens your doorway. This one robed, hooded and accompanied by the subtle scent of candle wax and ink. A monk, which means only one thing. The monastery wants something. You steal. Yourself. He approaches with practiced humility, clutching a rolled-up parchment in one hand and a small iron bell in the other. You take the bell first, examine it out of habit. The clapper is loose. The mounting bracket is cracked. It's small, maybe for an inner chamber or a personal chapel. Definitely not for summoning the divine with authority. The monk smiles gently. We were wondering if it could ring again by nightfall. Of course they were. You accept the bell with a polite nod, then unroll the parchment. It's a list. A long one. Hinges for the cloister doors, 2 candle holders, a small gate latch, and for some reason 6 identical hooks. Decorative ones. Your eyes skim to the bottom. Urgent before Compline. You give the monk a look that says, I have 2 arms, not 8. He just nods slowly, as though that settles it. You've learned never to argue with monks. They speak gently, but they wield deadlines like swords, and guilt like siege engines. You wave him off, set the bell down carefully, and begin rearranging your priorities. Again, fun, historical fact monasteries were among the busiest customers for smiths in the medieval world. Despite their vows of simplicity, monks had an astonishing number of things that needed hinges, locks, tools, bells, and grates, especially bells. So many bells. You could spend your entire life repairing bells and still not understand why each hallway needs its own quirky tidbit. Some monks believed the tone of a bell could influence spiritual purity. Too sharp, and it might disrupt contemplation. Too dull, and it could lull the brethren into sinful naps. You once made a bell that was declared dangerously pleasant. It still hangs in the library. Historians still argue whether the obsession with bell tone was practical or deeply symbolic, part acoustics, part theology, part monks just being particular. You suspect all 3. You start with the bell. The crack in the bracket is small but problematic. If you heat it too much, it'll warp. If you don't heat it enough, it'll fail again. You tap it gently on the anvil and begin grinding the seam. The apprentice watches curiously. Why not just make a new one? He asks. Because this one's already been blessed, you mutter, and I'm not in the business of arguing with heaven. He gets quiet after that. You mend the bracket, reshape the mount, and carefully reattach the clapper tight enough to hold, loose enough to swing. You test it once. The sound is soft, clean, not cheerful but obedient. A good bell next. The hinges. You grab flat iron bars and start scoring them for folding. You'll need to punch holes for the pins, curl the loops, and match the pairs perfectly, or the cloister doors will creak, and then someone will show up at your forge claiming it's disturbing prayer that each hinge takes time. You heat, bend, flatten, punch, cool. Then repeat. Your apprentice tries to help. He scorches one and ruins the symmetry. You sigh, gently take it from him, and reheat the bar. You don't say anything. You don't have to. The quiet clang of your correction says enough. While waiting for a piece to heat. You start shaping the candle holder's curved hooks designed to hold small saucers. Monks always want these to look simple, but they also get picky if one curl is tighter than another. You split the difference, clean lines, gentle arcs, nothing fancy. Just elegant enough to say someone cared. The apprentice files the gate latch while you weld the last of the hooks. Your hands are aching now. Not sharp pain, just that deep, molten ache that lives in your wrists, your knuckles, your shoulders, the kind that never quite goes away. You flex your fingers once, then keep going. Another small thing, monasteries often had strict rules about silence, but not for blacksmiths. Your noise was allowed, even respected. Some said it echoed the rhythm of work, of purpose, even of prayer. You've heard monks recite psalms in time with your hammer strikes. You never told them you were improvising. You lay out the completed pieces on a wooden board, hinges, hooks, latch, bell. The candle holders glimmer faintly, still warm. Not art, not beauty, but exact, functional, whole. The monk returns just as you're cooling the final piece. He inspects the collection, nods, and gives you a pouch of coins that actually CL inks. Progress. You ask if he needs help carrying it all. He smiles. The Lord strengthens my arms. You bite back a joke about letting him swing the hammer next. Time. Once he's gone, the forge feels unusually quiet. You sit. Just for a minute, your apprentice breaks the silence. You ever want to be a monk? You look at him. No fire, you say. He nods. Fair enough. There's something sacred in your work, sure, but it's not quiet. It's not contemplative. It's chaos-controlled. Heat and noise and sweat turned into usefulness. You rise, rub your hands on your apron and glance at the slate. 2 more requests have been added. You didn't even hear them come in. It never ends, but you nod anyway. You always do. Market day arrives with the usual fanfare of chickens escaping, carts rattling over cobblestones, and people arguing about the price of onions. You're already sweating before the sun climbs above the thatched rooftops. Today isn't about hammering, today's about hauling. You've loaded up a handcart with your week's worth of wares, nails bundled with twine, hinges stacked like iron sandwiches, 2 fire pokers, a set of shears, 3 door latches, and a small iron pot that took far longer to make than anyone will pay for. The cart groans as you push it forward, its wheels juddering over every bump in the road like they're protesting this whole event. You groan louder. You and the cart are spiritually aligned. Your apprentice walks beside you, eating an apple, like he hasn't just watched you wrestle 40 pounds of raw iron for 3 straight days. You think anyone will buy the sickle? He asks. You shrug. Depends how many weeds they're trying to kill. The village square is already bustling by the time you arrive. Farmers, traders, craftsmen, and opportunists line up their goods. Cloth, grain, salted fish, pottery. Most of it looks exactly like last week's. The town crier is shouting something about a new curfew. No one is listening. A dog steals a sausage and bolts. A baby cries because its hat fell off. Market day in all its glory. You find your usual spot beside the cooper, whose barrel display looks suspiciously taller than yours. You nod at him. He nods back. Rivals, technically, but friendly enough. You arrange your tools carefully on a cloth-covered table. Presentation matters. If you look too desperate, they'll haggle you down to breadcrumbs. Too confident, and they'll assume your prices are absurd. You need that perfect middle ground, just weary enough to be trustworthy. Within minutes, the first customer arrives, a woman looking for a cooking hook to hang over her fire. You show her 2 options. She picks the smaller one and immediately tries to offer you half a dozen eggs in exchange. You smile politely and ask for coin. She frowns like you've just insulted her goat, then storms off. Welcome to medieval salesmanship. Here's your fun historical fact for the hour. In many towns, blacksmiths were not allowed to set their own prices freely. The local reeve or guild would often regulate what you could charge for common items: nails, hinges, horseshoes, so you didn't exploit the villagers. Meanwhile, the baker could sell yesterday's bread for twice the cost if he slapped some ash on it and called it stone-fired. quirky tidbit? Some blacksmiths developed a kind of coded language to keep track of customers who were good payers and those who were creatively forgetful. You've got your own system. A small scratch on the underside of the hinge, a slight curve in the nail-bundled twine. You'd never say it aloud, but you remember. Historians still argue whether the markets were true community spaces or just chaotic, semi-legal gambling dens with vegetables. Either way, they were exhausting. Your apprentice sells a latch to an elderly man who insists on shaking your hand for an uncomfortable amount of time. Another woman haggles you down on a pair of tongs, promising next time she'll pay full price. You nod. You both know she won't. A young boy points at your fire poker and asks, "Is that a sword?" You reply, "Only if you're very polite with it." His mother scolds him, but you catch the faintest smile on her lips that mid-morning turns to noon. You've sold 5 hinges, 1 sickle, told you, and all your nails. Of course, 3 of those were bartered for onions, and the 4th was paid in something that might be cheese, but could also be wax. You're afraid to sniff it. You sit on the edge of your cart, wipe your brow, and glance around. The cooper is laughing with a customer. The baker's stall is swarmed. The cloth merchant is yelling about thread count to someone who clearly has never counted a thread in her life. You close your eyes briefly, just long enough to breathe. "Excuse me," comes a voice. You open them to find a merchant standing before your table. Clean tunic, foreign shoes, fancy. Too fancy for this town. "I'm looking for lock plates," he says. "Sturdy ones for traveling chests." You gesture to a crate under the bench. He kneels, inspects them one by one, nods slowly. "These will do," he says, and to your surprise, drops a small pouch into your palm without even haggling. Coin. Real coin. "You make them yourself?" he asks. You nod. He studies you for a moment. "You ever thought about moving to a city?" You pause, then say, "Every time it rains." He laughs, says he'll be back through in a month. Asks if you take commissions. You nod again. He leaves. Just like that, the apprentice stares at you like you've just been knighted. "You gonna go?" You shake your head. Cities have more people like him. He thinks for a moment, then nods. You spend the next hour bartering, chatting, answering strange questions about how hot iron really gets, hot enough to ruin your day, and managing not to strangle anyone. You sell the last of your tools just as the clouds start to roll in. You pack up your cart slowly. What little coin you've made jingles in your pocket. Not a fortune, but enough to buy coal, salt, and just maybe a decent cut of meat. Your apprentice offers to push the cart back. You let him try. He immediately regrets it. You smile anyway. The road home is uneven. The cart rocks. Your legs ache, but there's a rhythm to this walk. You sold the week's work. Now it's time to make another one. The cart creaks with every rut in the road as you and your apprentice trudge back toward the forge. One wheel wobbles like it's had a long day too. Your boots squish in the soft mud left from last week's rain. Somewhere behind you, the distant clang of the town bell signals the end of market hours, as if to say, "That's enough optimism for one day." You reach your forge just as the sun dips behind the trees, setting the sky aflame in streaks of gold and soot-colored gray. You guide the cart around to the side and begin unloading the essentials coal Scrap, salt, and a bit of barley from a trade you hadn't meant to make but somehow agreed to. Inside the workshop, the air still carries yesterday's heat, trapped. Under the low roof like an old grudge. You don't restart the forge tonight. No, you've done enough for one day. Instead, you light a single oil lamp, its flickering flame casting soft shadows across the anvil. The place looks calmer without the roar of fire. Almost gentle dot, then comes the knock dot. You don't even flinch anymore. Just open the door, standing. There is a lanky figure in drab clothes, one of the Lord's stewards, holding a wax-sealed letter like it's a dead fish. You take it. You know exactly what it is. You've been expecting it. The iron tacks. You crack the seal with a tired thumb. The letter is elegantly written, unnecessarily so. Flowing ink and flowered language that basically says, "We're taking a portion of everything you make, because we can." Fun historical fact medieval lords often imposed material taxes. On blacksmiths, not just coin, but actual goods. A set number of nails, hinges, or tools per season, demanded as tribute. It was how nobles kept their estates running without having to dip into their own purses. Quirky little injustice? Some lords specified absurd items. One blacksmith was reportedly required to provide a trivet for the lady's dog twice a year. You pray yours never reads that clause in the tax scroll. Historians still argue whether this was a structured form of redistribution or just aristocratic freeloading with legal flair. From where you're standing, it's the second one all day. You tuck the letter into your ledger and walk slowly back to your workbench. You'll need to set aside materials now, maybe 10% of this week's work, maybe more. Depends on how generous the steward is feeling when he comes to collect. The apprentice watches you carefully. They're taking your tools? Not all of them, you mutter. Just the ones they like. He says nothing. Good. You're not in the mood to explain feudalism through clenched teeth. Instead, you pull out your tally slate and begin marking. Items to withhold 4 hinges, 12 nails, 1 latch, maybe that extra set of shears. You sigh as you mark each one, like you're handing away small pieces of yourself, which you are, in a way. Every twist of metal carries your breath, your sweat, your time, all gifted freely to a system you never signed up for, and yet you do it. Because if you don't, the next visit won't come with parchment. It'll come with guards. You once tried to negotiate. Just once, the steward smiled like you were a child asking why the moon doesn't fall. He then handed you an additional request for a polished horseshoe display. You made it. But you hammered a tiny face into the underside. No one's noticed. Yet you close your ledger and run a hand down your face. Soot flakes off. Your skin feels like it's made of iron filings. You look at your apprentice. You'll have to pay it too one day, you say. He frowns. What if I don't? You point at a pair of old manacles hanging on the wall. Not decorative, he gulps. Then you hand him a small bundle of scrap twisted. Rods, offcuts, a broken hinge pin. See what you can make, you tell him. Nothing fancy, just useful. He sits by the side bench and starts arranging them, trying to find the potential inside the useless. You watch for a minute, not judging, just observing. He's clumsy but improving. His hammer grip isn't awful anymore. That's something. Outside, the sky darkens to deep indigo. You light another lamp. It casts a warm, low glow across your tools, making them shimmer like ancient relics. You take a moment to oil your hammer handles, check the anvil for cracks, clean out the slag from the forge base. These are the quiet tasks, the ones you do when no one's looking, the ones that keep everything moving tomorrow. And that's the point, really. You keep the village moving. They don't always see it, but you do. You stand at your bench, staring at a pile of iron. It doesn't look like much, but by week's end it'll be hinges on doors, tips on plows, bars across gates, bells in towers. You take broken things and give them purpose. And, then because someone has to, you give some of them away. That's the job, and you keep showing up for it. Night wraps itself around the village like a heavy cloak, muffling sound and stretching every shadow. Most homes are dark now, save for a few flickers of candlelight behind shuttered windows. A dog barks in the distance. Somewhere, someone is still arguing over the price of salted fish. But the forge your forge burns quietly on. You shouldn't be working, not at this hour. But the torch bracket for the Reeves granary still isn't finished. And if you leave it until morning, someone will undoubtedly come knocking at dawn, wondering why the world hasn't been saved yet. The fire hums low and steady. The coals glow like watchful eyes. You're shaping scrollwork, now decorative curls in an iron bar that will hold a torch on the granary wall. It's simple work in theory, but the Reeves wife made a comment about flourishes. And you know that means this needs to be prettier than it has any right to be. Your apprentice fell asleep an hour ago, slumped beside the coal stack with his arms crossed and one boot half off. You could wake him, but honestly, you envy him. Besides, this part, the after-dark work, is something you've grown oddly fond of. When the village is still, the forge is yours. You turn the iron bar slowly over the flames, watching it soften. You bend the scroll shape with the rounded horn. On your anvil, gently curving the heated end like a ribbon of shadow. A slight squeak escapes from the metal as it cools into place. It's almost polite. You test the angle, adjust it, tap it into submission. The bracket is shaping up nicely. A little crooked, maybe, but charmingly so. Like most things around here. Here's a historical truth that people tend to forget. Blacksmiths often worked at night, not by choice, but by necessity. During the day, customers flooded in with demands, small talk, and just a quick fix. The real craft happened after hours, when the only sound was the iron breathing and your own heartbeat echoing in your ears. Quirky detail? In some parts of medieval Europe, smiths were prohibited from working after sundown because people feared the nighttime forge was a place for secret dealings, magical pacts, curses, or forging charms in the dark. You laugh at that now. If anything magical ever happened here, it was getting through a week without snapping at a customer. Historians still argue whether these fears were rooted in actual incidents or just a reflection of how mysterious your trade seemed to those who didn't understand it. You figure people fear what they don't hear clearly, and nothing's quieter than someone shaping fire into tools while the rest of the world sleeps. You set the bracket aside to cool and sit on your stool for a moment, rubbing your temples. Your head throbs in a slow, rhythmic pulse, probably dehydration, or age, or both. You glance around the forge. It's a mess, as always. Scraps piled in one corner, tongs hanging like skeletal hands from wall hooks, a pair of boots with no owner, resting beneath the bench. You should clean. You won't. Not tonight. You do, however, check the water barrel. Still warm, still half full. You cup your hand and drink. The taste is metallic, but you've stopped noticing. Your body accepts it like it accepts everything else, reluctantly, but without protest. You hear movement behind you, your apprentice stirring. He blinks gradually, wipes his face, then mumbles, "Did I miss it?" You nod toward the finished torch. "Bracket?" He frowns. "I wanted to help." "You helped by being quiet," you reply with a smirk. He laughs, then winces as he stretches. "My back's killing me." "Good," you say. "Means you're doing it right." He walks over, examining the bracket in the lamplight. "It's nice," he says. You nod. "It'll hold a torch." "That's the point." He traces one of the curls with his finger. "Why the extra bend?" You shrug. "So the Reeves wife doesn't ask for a replacement next week." He grins and starts tidying tools without being told. You allow yourself to feel a rare flicker of satisfaction. Maybe he'll turn out all right. Maybe. You start on the next task without ceremony, reforming a bent iron hook meant to secure a barn shutter. It's cracked at the base, likely from someone slamming it during a storm. You heat it gently, reshaping the bend, adding a reinforcement plate. It's work you've done 100 times before, but that doesn't make it mindless. If anything, that makes it harder, because it's too easy to stop paying attention. The fire flares a little as you add fresh coal. Sparks scatter across the stone floor, fading before they can land. You stare into the flames, watching them flicker and curl, dancing in time with the thoughts you're too tired to finish. The apprentice returns from his sweeping and asks, "Do you ever think about leaving?" You don't answer at first dot then. Without looking up, you say, "I think about what I'd do if I did." And you turn the hook with your tongs. "I can't imagine not fixing things." He sits beside you on the bench, silent for a moment. "I thought I'd be making swords," you chuckle. "So did I." You finish the hook, test the strength with a few solid tugs, then set it on the cooling shelf. You glance at your hands, filthy, cracked, nicked. No one ever writes songs about these hands. But without them, nothing in this village would hold together. The apprentice stifles a yawn. "Get some rest," you say. "We've got work tomorrow." "Do we ever not?" You shake your head. He lies back down by the coal stack, already half asleep. Before his head settles, you douse the lamp, leaving only the dim glow of the forge behind. You sit for a while longer, alone with the coals, the tools, and the dark. The metal sleeps now, and soon, so will you. You wake to pain, not sharp, not sudden, just the same dull orchestra playing in every joint you own. Your knees creak, your shoulders ache. One of your wrists crackles like a handful of dry twigs when you flex it. Ah yes, morning. You sit up, slowly brushing flakes of ash from your clothes. You must have dozed off sitting at the workbench again. The coals in the forge have cooled to a slumbering red, not dead, but close. Like you, the apprentice is still curled by the coal pile, snoring, softly with one arm flopped over a sack of scrap. His mouth is slightly open. A piece of straw sticks out of his hair. You leave him be. He's still young enough to sleep through anything, even himself. You stretch, grab your apron, and set about reawakening the forge. You shovel in fresh coal, adjust the airflow, and coax the flames with long practiced exhales. Within minutes, the fire stirs to life again, first orange, then yellow, then that familiar, comforting, white-hot glow. You smile a little, despite your self-got first job today. Nothing big, just a few repairs from the steward's list. A wagon pin, a cooking hook, a few garden tools. You heat the broken hoe head and start hammering it back into alignment, your body. Moving automatically, now hammer, flip, hammer again. You barely notice the rhythm. It's muscle memory etched in iron, but something catches your eye as you work your left forearm beneath the soot. A thin red line, fresh and stinging. You don't remember cutting yourself. Doesn't matter. You dunk it into the water barrel, hissing quietly at the sting. Then go back to work, because in this life, injuries aren't interruptions. They're just part of the job. Fun, historical fact. Blacksmiths had some of the highest injury rates among medieval trades. Burns, bruises, cuts, smashed fingers, you name it. But most kept working through them. There was no workers' guild to complain to, no medieval HR department. Just spit, grit, and an old rag to tie around the wound. Quirky tidbit: some smiths kept a lucky hammer or tongs they refused to let anyone else touch. If it broke or was misplaced, they'd take it as a bad omen and sometimes even close shop for the day. You have one such hammer. You don't talk about it. But if anyone moves it, you notice. Historians still argue whether blacksmiths were considered tough out of necessity or just constantly too injured to complain. You suspect it's both. You're a walking contradiction, unbreakable and constantly breaking. The apprentice wakes eventually, rubbing his eyes and looking around like he doesn't remember what planet he's on. You toss him a small hand file and a cracked horseshoe. Smooth. The edges, you say. He grumbles, but gets to work. He's used to mornings now. You've broken him in like a stubborn anvil, as you work through the next task, a snapped axe head. You feel something tug in your lower back, sharp, hot, and immediate. You pause, not from alarm, just from familiarity. You've had this pain before. It comes and goes like a tax collector with a bad attitude. You set down the axe and sit for a moment on the bench, massaging your side. You all right? Your apprentice asks. You nod. Just settling. Settling into what? You smile faintly. Into someone who really regrets lifting that wagon wheel last week. He chuckles and returns to filing. You grab a length of iron and hold it to the forge, watching the metal bloom with heat. You begin shaping it into a bracket for a barn. Door. Your hammer blows are slower today, more measured. The ache is everywhere now, dull and pervasive, as if your bones are singing a low dirge. You think, briefly, about how long you've been doing this. You try to remember the first time you picked up a hammer, your father's hands guiding yours, or maybe your master's, someone's. The memory is blurry around the edges, like a dream that won't quite form. You look at your hands now scarred, cracked, permanently stained with soot and iron dust. The kind of hands that only belong to people who don't get to rest. Another sharp pain shoots through your ribs when you lift a pail. You drop it, cursing under your breath. The apprentice looks up, concerned. Maybe you should stop for today. You snort. And do what? Knit? But you do sit, just for a moment, just to breathe. Here's the thing people don't talk about. In the end, the forge always wins. Not in some dramatic, fiery way. It wins slowly. It wins in your spine, your knees, your lungs. The cough that's been building for a few years, that's not smoke anymore. That's something deeper, something permanent. You try not to think about it. You've got work to do. You rise again, slower this time. Your fingers are stiff, your grip weak. You adjust the hammer handle so it rests better against your palm. You're adapting, that's all. Not slowing down, just working smarter. The apprentice doesn't say anything, but he watches you closely. He sees it. You don't like that, but you let it go. You finish the bracket and set it aside. Then start working on a lantern hook for the innkeeper. Your strikes are quiet now, almost gentle. The forge hisses like it's whispering back, outside. Someone shouts about a pig escaping. You hear laughter, hurried footsteps, and the unmistakable clatter of hooves on cobblestone. Another day in paradise. You lean on the bench for a moment, catching your breath. You won't stop. You can single quotes T. This is your life. And your body? It's just part of the cost. The sun hangs low in the sky, casting long, slanted beams through the open forge doors. Dust motes float lazily in the amber light, dancing above your workbench as if mocking the way your hands no longer move like they used to. You rub your thumb across your palm, trying to shake out the stiffness. No luck. It's baked in now. The apprentice is at the grindstone, shaping a hinge pin. He's humming something tuneless, off-key, but steady. You haven't corrected him. You're too tired to be annoyed. You grab your ledger and scratch another name off the list. A pitchfork handle bracket. Done. You run your fingers down the remaining orders. Nothing new. Nothing exciting. Just more of the same. You read the words, but they all blur together now. Latch, hinge, pin, brace. You stare at the list for a moment longer than usual. Once long ago, you wanted to make swords. Not horseshoes. Not frying pan hooks. Not humble iron nails for creaky doors. Swords. Real ones. Beautiful. Balanced. Made for kings or warriors or great tailies that would last longer than the people in them. You remember staying late as an apprentice. Carving practice crossguards out of scrap. Mimicking hilts from the stories the butcher's son used to recite. You even tried to forge one once. A crude thing warped at the tang, brittle at the edge, but it looked like a sword. That was enough to keep the dream alive for a while. Now, you pull out a fresh iron bar and stare at it, wondering for just a moment if you could still make one. But your fingers ache. Your back complains. The forge doesn't burn quite hot enough. And besides, no, one's asked you to. You set the bar aside because you have a gate bolt to finish. Instead, fun historical fact. Swords in the Middle Ages weren't usually made by village smiths. They were the work of master armorers, craftsmen, who worked in urban guilds or royal forges, who specialized in balance, edge geometry, and pattern welding. Out here in the mud and straw, your job was to make the sword's scabbard fittings, maybe, if the buyer was local, quirky twist. Some blacksmiths did still try. Every so often, one would create a blade for a traveling knight or a local militia. And sometimes the blade would be good enough that it would be passed down generation to generation, gaining stories even as its maker's name was forgotten. Historians still argue whether these Real smith-made swords ever saw real battle. But there are records, scraps of letters, mentions in ledgers, fragments buried in graves. Maybe one or two of them made history. You doubt yours ever did. You finish the gate bolt in silence. The hammer feels heavy. Your swings are slower now. Your strikes more careful. You don't trust your strength like you used to. Not because it's gone, but because it doesn't always arrive on time. The apprentice is watching again. You sigh. What? He shrugs. Just wondering when I'll be better than you. You smile. Sooner than you think. He grins then. Looks away, a little embarrassed. You wipe your brow and sit on the edge of the workbench. The sun has slipped lower. The forge glows softly, not roaring now, just warm. Like it knows the day is winding down. You glance toward a shelf above the tools. An old shape rests there, wrapped in oiled cloth, untouched for years. You climb up, carefully, bones cracking like kindling, and lift it down. It's your first sword. You unwrap it slowly. The blade is dull. The edge is chipped. The hilt was bound in cheap leather that's now flaking away, but it's still a sword. Heavy, simple, honest. Your apprentice peers over your shoulder. You made that? You nod. Why'd you stop? You run a hand down. The flat of the blade. No one wanted swords. They wanted shovels, and I needed to eat. He's quiet for a moment. Then, tentatively, can I try? You pause, then hand him the blade. He holds it like it matters, like it means something. He tests the weight, swings it once too fast, but not badly. He smiles like a boy at a feast. You chuckle. You'll have to earn your own steel. He nods, solemn as a monk. You place the sword back on the shelf. Wrap it again and let it rest. The sun disappears completely. You light a single lantern and let the forge settle into embers. You eat dinner at your bench bread, cheese, a half-soft apple. The apprentice eats next to you, still excited, still thinking about the sword. You say nothing. You don't want to talk about dreams tonight, because sometimes dreams get heavy, and sometimes you have to set them down to pick up something more, useful like a pair of tongs or a coal shovel or a gate latch no one else can fix. You clean your tools by habit, oil the hammerheads, stack the scrap neatly, place the unfinished items just so, lined up for tomorrow, because there's always a tomorrow, and always another piece of metal waiting to be told what it is. You sit for a long moment in the quiet, not sad, not angry, just still. The apprentice yawns and heads for his bedroll. You stay by the fire a little longer and let the sword stay wrapped. The morning fog rolls in thick, curling low along the ground and curling even lower in your joints. You feel it before you see it, damp air pressing into your lungs, your knees giving quiet protest as you stand from your stool by the forge. The fire hasn't been stoked yet, but you can feel the heat still lingering in the stones, like an old memory not quite faded. You move slowly this morning, slower than usual. You don't even pretend not to notice it anymore. The stiffness is familiar now, your companion, your alarm clock, your rival. You stretch until your spine pops, then shuffle toward the bellows. The apprentice is already up. He nods at you from the bench, hammer in hand, working at a small latch with focused intensity. You raise an eyebrow. I couldn't sleep, he offers. You grunt, but it's a grunt of approval. You're not ready to say it out loud, but he's becoming something close to useful. Maybe even good. Today's work is light, but steady. There's a broken stove grate from the baker, another snapped hinge from the fishmonger's shed, and a curious request from the schoolmaster for something that will lock children out of the tool chest. You make a mental note to reinforce it. As you prepare your tools, you glance out the doorway. The village is stirring, chickens clucking, the distant call of the crier, hooves clopping in slow rhythm. You see the familiar silhouettes moving through the mist, farmers, traders, the boy who still insists on calling you Master Iron Hands for some reason. You don't correct him. It's the only title anyone's given you. You return to the forge, set a bar of iron into the coals, and begin pumping the bellows. The glow returns, and with it, the rhythm. You're not moving quickly, but you are moving. And that's enough. You start on the schoolmaster's lock. It's not complicated, but it requires precision. The hasp must be snug, the clasp perfectly aligned. You file the edges until they sing softly against the stone, then tap the pieces into place with light, even strokes. The sound is smaller than usual, less thunder, more whisper. Your hands are steady, slower, but steady. The apprentice brings you a finished nail he's particularly proud of. It's slightly bent. You nod anyway. Better than yesterday, you say. He beams. It's strange watching someone become what you were. Stranger still to feel yourself becoming whatever comes next. You used to dread this idea that you'd fade, your skills would dull, your name would be forgotten. But now, you look at the apprentice and realize you weren't just forging metal all these years. You were forging continuity, stability, people, even if they didn't always notice. Here's a soft, sobering historical truth. Most blacksmiths lived and died in the same village. Their work outlived them, but their names didn't. A gate hinge on a barn door might last longer than the man who made it. But that hinge, it still opens the door, still holds the world together. Quirky tradition. In some villages, when an old smith passed, the forge was never allowed to go cold. The fire would be passed literally into the hands of the apprentice as a kind of sacred transfer, a ritual of heat and hammer. You've never seen it done, but you've heard the stories. Maybe they're true. Maybe they should be. Historians still argue whether these rituals were spiritual or simply practical. But you know the truth. A forge fire is life. Not just for metal, but for the village, the people, the rhythm of things. You pause your work, take a deep breath, and listen to the sounds around you. The forge crackles, the apprentice files, the village breathes. You're part of it, still. But you know your role is changing. You glance at your old hammer, the one with the worn grip and the tiny, invisible nick on the back from when it slipped in your third year as a journeyman. You trace your fingers over the handle. It's almost time to hand it over. Not today. But soon. The rest of the day moves like slow honey. Repairs, minor reshaping, a quick sharpening of a draw knife blade. You sit more than you used to. You let the apprentice finish the smaller jobs. He doesn't ask for help anymore, he just does them. That's how you know he's ready. Not because he's perfect, but because he's trying to be useful, even when no one tells him to. By the time the sun begins to sink, casting the forge in golden silence, you realize your list is finished. For the first time in, well, maybe a year, you clean your tools carefully. hang the tongs, scrub the bench. You even wipe down the anvil, which surprises even you. The apprentice stretches his arms. Done for the day? You nod. Dot, he hesitates. Then, you ever think about stopping? You look at him. Dot, then down at your hands. And finally at the forge. I think about when I'll need to, you say. He nods. It's enough. Dot, you step outside together. The air is cool, the mist has lifted, and the stars are beginning to prick the sky. Dot, the forge glows behind you, quiet and alive, still burning, still breathing. Even when your hands one day stop, the fire will keep going, because someone has to carry it next. Dot, and now, finally someone can. The night air is still now, wrapping gently around the forge like a warm blanket. The hammer rests on its hook. The anvil glows faintly with remembered heat. The coals have gone quiet, humming only in their sleep, not in their roar. The apprentice has gone to bed. You can hear his slow, even breathing from the corner of the shop. His dreams are probably filled with glowing metal and shapes that haven't quite found their names yet. You sit alone in the doorway, wrapped in a wool cloak that smells faintly of oil and iron. The stars above are brighter than usual. Or maybe you're just looking at them properly for the first time in a long while. You breathe in and out. There's no rush, no weight of unfinished work, just the soft hush of a forge at rest and a body that has earned its stillness. You listen to the quiet creak of the rafters, to the distant hoot of an owl, to the crackle of a coal turning gently to ash. The world is slowing, and you are too. You close your eyes for a moment, and in that moment, you remember the first time your hands wrapped around a hammer. Dot, and now, they are tired, but still steady. Dot, the forge will still be here tomorrow. Dot, and so, perhaps will you? Dot, just for one more day. Dot, sleep now. Blacksmith. The fire is safe. Sweet dreams.